as we've discussed before, grand jury testimony, you can't just say you want it. There's so much in there. That's probably not the way to do it. I know the House Oversight has released some documents. Critics are saying these have already been released. So what more is there? How do you put the issue to bed? How do you have the victims who are speaking out feel like they are also served in the process?
Yeah, that's a real challenge here. I mean, because the victims were not served by this process. There was a lot of opaqueness. There was a lot of decision making where they were not included in the decision making. If you go back to the non-prosecution agreement down in South Florida. So, look, I hate to have any sort of division between me and victims' rights and victims' wishes. But I have to say, I'm a little bit of a stick in the mud about the idea of endlessly releasing prosecutor files when there's not a trial or a guilty plea. And, you know, we do that in part to protect victims, but we also protect law enforcement techniques. And frankly, as distasteful as it sounds in this case, we do like to protect people that are never charged, that never have a chance to kind of acquit themselves or acknowledge the conduct from public scrutiny. So I do have a bit of a hang up on this whole concept of endlessly plowing through the file, but it seems to have its own life in the Epstein case for some reason.
And certainly on the left, and President Trump has just called it the Epstein hoax again minutes ago in the Oval Office when asked about it. It is a story that does not go away. And even Republican Congressman Thomas Massey is joining in with some of today's movements. All right, I want to turn to what is happening with the Alien Enemies Act, a creative way to deport all those Tren de Aragua Venezuelan gang members. They went to the big mega prison in El Salvador, and now it may actually go to the Supreme Court because the courts are saying he can't use alien enemies. What do you make of this? Because there's so many illegals here. They're actually using people who aren't immigration lawyers that we've talked about previously, Jim, to try and move some of these cases ahead. This just seems like it has to go to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think it's got that momentum where it's going to go because you're starting to get different rulings from different judges in federal courts across the land. Look, the narrow legal issue, Bianca, is whether or not when you invoke this emergency power to have kind of an accelerated deportation or removal, as they call it, can you say that there's an invasion or a predatory incursion that's fueling it? And that's why the Alien Enemies Act has always been kind of linked to wars, a War of 1812, World War I, World War II. But even in the few times that it's been used as a basis for deportation, it's been at least a little closer to war than we are right now, with this idea of a gang being kind of cut loose in the United States with the blessing of the Venezuelan government. So that's the legal issue. But the broader issue is separation of powers. You know, should the judiciary constantly, and it seems like it's almost always judges in particular locations, micromanage the executive branch when they try to affect these deportations? And I think that's the hook for the Supreme Court, where they're going to say, you know what, we've been trying to warn the lower courts to step back, respect the separation of powers. They're not doing it, so now we have to wade in. They may not love the stretch of the language in that statute, but I think they love the idea of executive power.
Jim, real quick, you call it a sign of political lawlessness in D.C. We've had two cases where grand juries have refused to hand up indictments of people that were charged with threatening to kill President Trump. Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. attorney, is speaking out saying this is a broken system. It does seem like this is the resistance. Are you shocked? I mean, we always say you can indict a ham sandwich, but as you know, we saw the guy with the sub. He wasn't indicted either.
Yeah, apparently you can throw the ham sandwich, but you can't be the ham sandwich. But look, in D.C., the problem is you have a history of nullification over the years. It used to be on kind of racial grounds. This seems to be the worst form of nullification when the standard is only probable cause. It's a very low standard for charging. And so they do seem to be becoming politically active at the expense of prosecutions. But if I'm Judge Jeanine, I want to read the minutes. I want to hear exactly how these cases were presented, because I'm a little concerned that you might have prosecutors that are tanking it. I mean, it's not a heavy lift to get an indictment.
And perhaps deliberately.
Like you know, I was a prosecutor for 27 years. I never got no-billed. I never lost an indictment. So I think it's a pretty unusual territory she needs to look into.
Because now it's racking up. There's quite a few here with these grand juries, and they're all in D.C. Jim Trusty, great insight in some of today's big legal movements and stories. I hope to see you back here soon. Thanks, sir.
Sure. Good to see you. All right. Take it easy.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.